The cage was too small, and that was the first thing Dario noticed. Not the smell of the market, though that hit him first. Burnt oil, alien spices, something wet, and animal underneath it all. Not the noise of 100 vendors shouting across Tulgrave Station's lower ring. Not even the flickering overhead lights that had been broken for 3 years and nobody had bothered to fix. The cage. Too small. It sat between a rack of synthetic fur pelts and a tank of bioluminescent slugs, low to the ground like an afterthought. The thing inside it was about the size of a large cat, though it looked nothing like one. Pale gold scales, dulled to the color of old bone. Wings folded tight against its body, not resting, but pressed down, held there by a thin band of dark material wrapped around its middle. Ribs showing through the scales like ridges in dry sand. Eyes half open, watching the market foot traffic with an expression that was too flat, too steady to be animal. Dario stopped. He had not planned to stop. He had been heading back to Bay 14, where his ship, the Crestfall, was waiting on a replacement coolant seal. He had 2 hours to kill and a headache building behind his eyes from the recycled station air, and he had made the mistake of walking through the market level to find something to eat. He crouched down in front of the cage. The creature looked at him, not the way animals looked, with nerves or blankness or hunger. It looked at him the way a person looks at a stranger, taking in information and deciding what to do with it. "You like her?" The vendor appeared from behind the pelt rack. He had 4 arms, gray skin the texture of a slug, and a smile that had too many teeth in it. His name badge said Brelk in 3 scripts. "What is it?" Dario asked. Brelk waved one of his 4 hands as if the question were barely worth answering. "Ornamental lizard. Very rare. Almost extinct species. Very sad story. Extremely decorative. Golden color is very fashionable right now on Mevis Prime." "Why are her wings tied down?" "For transport comfort," Brelk said smoothly. "She is calmer this way. Very gentle creature. Very low maintenance. Eats almost nothing, which is good because she does not have big appetite right now, but she will improve." She did not look like she would improve. She looked like she was 2 bad days from not waking up. Dario looked at the band around her middle more closely. It was not a transport harness. It was too tight. It pressed into the scales at the edges. He had seen something like it once before, a restraint used on cargo animals to keep them docile for long hauls. Illegal in 4 systems, technically permitted on Tulgrave because Tulgrave had the regulatory framework of a parking dispute. "How much?" he said. Brelk named a price. It was cheap, and that was worse than if it had been expensive. Cheap meant nobody wanted her. Cheap meant Brelk was tired of feeding her and wanted her gone before she became a loss. Dario had a budget for the coolant seal and enough left over for 1 decent meal, and not a lot else until his next cargo job paid out. He stood up and did the math in his head, which took about 4 seconds, and then he bought the creature for the price Brelk named without negotiating, which made Brelk look briefly disappointed, as if he had hoped to go lower. He took off his jacket while Brelk unlatched the cage. He had a worn flannel work shirt underneath, which was not warm enough for Tulgrave's lower ring, but that was not currently his problem. He wrapped the jacket around the creature when Brelk handed her out, carefully, because he was not sure where the wings were under the binding and he did not want to hurt them further. She did not move. She was very light. That was also bad. Dario walked back through the market toward Bay 14. The creature's head emerged from the jacket collar after about 30 seconds, gold scales catching the bad overhead lighting. She turned her head and looked down the corridor they had just come from, then up at the junction signs overhead. Her eyes moved from sign to sign with the deliberate, scanning motion of someone reading. Dario noticed. He kept walking. He told himself that some animals were smart. He had worked enough cargo runs to know that some creatures had minds behind their eyes that most people did not bother to look for. He told himself that, and he almost believed it, right up until the moment they passed a junction with 6 branching corridors, and the creature turned her head left to look at one of them, then looked up at him, then looked back at the corridor, the one that led to the docking ring, the shortest route to Bay 14, which was not marked on any of the junction signs they had passed. Dario kept his face neutral. He walked. The creature settled back into the jacket and closed her eyes. He told himself it was a coincidence. He almost believed that too. She ate the wrench. Not all of it. She got about a third of the way through the handle before Dario came back from the engine bay and took it away from her, at which point she looked at him with the particular calm of a creature that did not feel it owed anyone an explanation. "That was my wrench," he said. She blinked. Her eyes had gone from half-glazed to sharp in 4 days. The color had started coming back into her scales too, less old bone, more pale honey, and she had stopped letting her head droop when she sat. She sat very straight now, on the folded blanket he had put in the corner of his bunk quarters, and she watched him with the focused attention of someone studying for an exam. He had stopped pretending she was a lizard somewhere around day 2. Lizards did not watch you work. They did not follow your hands with their eyes when you were sorting components. They did not tilt their heads at an angle that was recognizably curious rather than instinctive. He put the wrench down on the work table and pulled out a container of protein paste, which he opened and slid toward her across the floor. She looked at it. She looked at him. She pushed it back. "You have to eat something," he said. She looked at the wrench. "That is a tool," he said. "Tools are not food." She continued to look at the wrench in a way that expressed a measured difference of opinion. In the end, he gave her a handful of spare metal fillings from the parts bin, offcuts, useless to him, and she ate those, neatly, one at a time, with the expression of someone being gracious about a compromise. He sat on his bunk and watched, and tried to work out what sort of biology that required, and came up empty. By day 5 her wings had color back in them too. He had cut the binding off on night 1, using the small wire cutters from his kit, slowly and carefully, while she stayed very still. The band had left pressure marks in the scale underneath. He had not said anything about that. He was not sure what he would have said. On day 6, she disassembled the faulty pressure valve he had left on the table. He discovered this when he came back from the galley with his meal to find the valve in 12 precise pieces, arranged on the table in an order he did not immediately understand. He picked up the pieces one at a time, and after a moment he understood. It was the order of the fault. She had taken it apart along the stress lines, laid it out so that the cracked ring was sitting by itself in the center, obvious, unmissable. He had been planning to replace the whole valve. The ring was a 5-minute fix. He looked at her. She was sitting very straight on her blanket, watching him with an expression that on a human face would have been polite patience. "Thank you," he said, slowly. Her head dipped. Not a nod exactly, but something in that direction. He fixed the valve in 5 minutes and thought about that for a long time. He had started talking to her the way he talked to the crestfall when something was going wrong, out loud, to nobody in particular, because it helped him think. He narrated what he was doing in the engine bay. He explained what was broken and why and what he was going to do about it. She followed along from her blanket, or sometimes from the doorway of the engine bay, which she had started visiting once she figured out she was allowed to leave the bunk quarters. The ship was old, and she seemed to find it interesting. He was in the middle of explaining a coolant routing problem, 9 days in, when the visiting engineer knocked on the bay door. Old reptilian, one of the Gressy species, done 3 decades of station work by the look of him. His name was Proust. He had come to return a borrowed diagnostic tool, which he handed to Dario, while exchanging the standard complaints about the station's air recycling. Then he looked past Dario's shoulder. Sarah, Dario had started calling her that, a name that had arrived from nowhere, though he wondered later if it had come from somewhere specific, was sitting in the far corner of the engine bay. She had grown in 9 days. She was nearly twice the size she had been in the cage. She was watching Proust with the attentive, measuring stillness she used when she was learning something new. Proust went the color of old ash. He said nothing. He made a short, polite noise about needing to get back to work, and he left. Dario watched him go. An hour later he saw, in the Crestfall's outgoing communication log, that Proust had sent a long-range encrypted signal. Long-range meant off-station. Encrypted meant not casual. He stood in front of the log for a while. Sarah had followed him to the cockpit. She stood beside him and looked at the screen. Then she looked at the door Proust had left through. There was no readable expression on her face, because she was not human and her face did not work the way human faces did. But Dario had been watching her for 9 days. He knew what her face looked like when she was not worried. This was not that. She spoke on a Tuesday. Dario had not been expecting it. He was half asleep on his bunk, the Crestfall humming along through open space 2 days out of Tulgrave on a standard cargo run, and he had been thinking about nothing particular. The route, the delivery timeline, whether the coolant seal was going to hold, when her voice came out of the dark corner of the room. "Dario." One word. His name. Clear and precise. No fumbling over the syllables, no approximation. As if she had been saving it up until she was sure she had it right. He fell off the bunk. He was not proud of this later. He hit the floor hard, scrambled upright, and spun to face the corner where she was curled. She was watching him with what might have been satisfaction. "You can talk," he said. She tilted her head slightly. The gesture had come to mean something like, "Obviously, but I was not ready before." He sat back on the edge of the bunk and looked at her for a long moment. She was bigger than she had been. Over a month in, she was the size of a large dog now, wings folded neatly along her back, scales a deep amber gold in the low light. She no longer looked like something that was about to die. She looked like something that was thinking very carefully about what came next. After that night, she spoke a little more each day, slowly, one sentence at a time, like she was testing the weight of each word before she trusted it. Her voice was low and had a resonance underneath it that sometimes made the Crestfall's hull plates vibrate at a frequency Dario could feel, but not quite hear. He did not push her. He asked questions when she seemed to want them, and he was quiet when she did not. She seemed to appreciate this, though appreciation from her looked like sitting near him rather than far away. On the fourth night, she told him her name. Not Sarah. That was his name for her, and she accepted it the way someone accepts a nickname. Not their name, but theirs now regardless. Her name, the one she had been given, was something that did not fully exist in spoken sound. When she said it in her own tongue, it produced a feeling in his chest like standing next to a bell when it rings. He could not repeat it. He tried once, and she looked at him with gentle patience, and he stopped trying. What it meant in his language, she told him, was, "She who holds the record of fire." "That is a significant name," he said. "Yes," she said. He thought about asking the next obvious question, and then thought that she would tell him when she was ready. He was correct. She told him 3 nights later, when the Crestfall was quiet and the cargo was still, and there was nothing between them and the stars outside but one thin hull. Her kind were called the Arini. They had not been pets. They had not been decorative lizards. They had been, once, one of the oldest peoples in this part of the galaxy. Not powerful in the way empires were powerful. Powerful in the way water is powerful, patient, pervasive, able to move through things that seemed solid. The Arini had a gift they called fire speech, language aimed not at minds, but at matter itself. Words that could reach into the structure of a thing and alter it at the smallest level. Not magic, not technology, something that sat in the space between the two, that the Arini had spent thousands of years learning to use carefully, because the same tongue that could mend a cracked hull could unmake one. The Syndicate of Orith had learned about fire speech 30 years ago, in the memory she shared with him, not in words but in something that arrived behind his eyes like images he had not chosen. Dario saw what came after. A raid. A community hidden deep in an uninhabited system, quiet, old, unbothered. Ships arriving without warning. Arini adults turning to hold the line, while the young were pushed toward the dark edges of the moon's surface to hide. Sarah had been very small. She had been separated. She did not know what happened to the others. She had been running, and then she had been caught, and then she had been in a series of smaller and smaller cages until she ended up in Brelk's stall on Tulgrave Station, wings bound, memory going dull at the edges, language slipping away. He sat with that for a while after the images faded. "The binding," he said. "It was not for transport." "No," she said. "It suppresses memory, language, the connection to fire speech." She paused. "You cut it on the first night. You looked like it was hurting you." She looked at him for a long moment. "I know," she said. "That is why I told you my name." Outside the viewport, the stars were doing what stars do, being old and far away and indifferent. Dario looked at them and thought about a people who went into hiding because they were hunted, and a hatchling who ended up in a cage, and the specific chain of small events that led to him buying a wrench he was going to have to replace. "The Syndicate," he said. "Are they still looking?" Sarah turned to face the viewport. Her eyes caught the starlight. "Yes," she said. "And now they know where to look." 3 days later, something dropped out of warp behind the Crestfall. Dario was in the cockpit when it happened. The proximity alarm did not go off, because whatever had come out of warp had done so at exactly the right distance to avoid triggering it. Not an accident, that kind of precision. He saw it on the rear sensor display, a ship, long, dark, narrow as a blade. moving fast and not hailing them yet, which meant it wanted him to know it was there before it spoke. Sarah was at the cockpit door. She had been in the engine bay. She had stopped moving the moment the ship appeared on the display. "You know that ship," Dario said. "Orith's Syndicate intercept vessel," she said. "They are called the Veritas class. Fast, well-armed. They do not come for cargo." The comm crackled. A voice came through, smooth and controlled in the way that very confident people are controlled. Not hiding anything, just comfortable. "Freighter Crestfall. This is Commander Duvas of the Orith Syndicate vessel Veritas. You are carrying a classified biological asset registered to Syndicate Research Division. Stand down your engines and prepare to be boarded for asset recovery. You will not be harmed if you cooperate. This message is a courtesy." Dario looked at the sensor display. Then he looked at Sarah. She was looking at him with an expression he had learned to read over the past weeks. It was the expression she used when she was waiting to see what he would do, and she did not yet know which way it was going to go. He picked up the comm. "Crestfall to Veritas," he said. "I'm going to need you to say that again, because I think you said you're planning to board my ship and take my crew, and I must have misheard." A short pause. "You have not misheard. The creature aboard your vessel is. Her name is Sarah," Dario said. "She's my crew. So the answer to your boarding request is no." Another pause. Longer this time. "Freighter Captain, I understand you may be unaware of what you are carrying. This creature is not a pet. She is a classified." "I know exactly what she is," Dario said, which was not entirely accurate, but was accurate enough. "I also know that you had her in a cage, and you wrapped her wings, and you took her language away from her, and you are not getting her back. So you can take your courtesy message and your very nice ship and find something else to do today." The comm clicked off. Dario looked at the sensor display. The Veritas was still there, still moving, beginning to angle toward intercept range. "He is not going to stop," Sarah said. "I know." Dario pulled up the engine controls. The Crestfall was a freighter. She was not built for running from intercept ships. The Veritas would be faster, more maneuverable, and better armed by a margin that was not worth calculating. "I am going to keep him talking as long as I can. What do you need?" She was already moving toward the engine bay. "Time," she said, "and do not be alarmed by the noise." He kept Duvas talking. He asked questions, slow ones, about jurisdiction and regulations and the exact definition of classified asset under Syndicate Code, all of which he had no knowledge of and was making up as he went, but Duvas answered anyway, perhaps because he was the kind of person who enjoyed explaining things to people who did not understand them. From the engine bay, a sound like low singing. Not language Dario could parse. It sat below the range of clear hearing, felt more in the bones than the ears, and the Crestfall's hull vibrated with it in a way that had nothing to do with the engine. 2 boarding pods launched from the Veritas and crossed the distance in under a minute. They connected to the Crestfall's port airlock with a sound like teeth clicking together. Dario had time to breathe in once and think about all the choices he had made that led to this exact moment. Then Sarah spoke from the engine bay. 7 words, in the old tongue, aimed at the Crestfall's aging reactor core. He could not hear them clearly, but he felt them in his hands and feet and teeth, felt the ship around him wake up into something that was not quite what it had been a second ago. The boarding pods blew free of the airlock like corks from a bottle. Not destroyed, just expelled, with authority, as if the ship had decided it did not want them there and acted accordingly. The Veritas lurched sideways, systems spiking across the board. Duvas's voice cut off mid-sentence. Dario hit the engines at full power while they had the gap. The Crestfall ran. She was still slower than the Veritas, and they both knew it. But the Veritas had just had something unexpected happen to its systems and needed a few minutes to understand what, and a few minutes was enough. Sarah returned to the cockpit and sat down. She looked tired in a way she did not usually let show. "Are you all right?" Dario asked. "I am not strong enough yet," she said. "That was a small thing. That was the most impressive small thing I have ever seen." She looked out at the stars ahead of them. "I know where to go," she said. "If you are willing. Are you going to tell me more about it, or are you going to do the mysterious thing again?" "It is where my people are," she said. "The ones who survived." Dario adjusted course without another question. No charts showed the system. Dario had checked 3 different navigation databases on the way there, and all 3 agreed that the coordinates Sarah gave him pointed at empty space. No star, no station, no registered body of any kind. What they found instead was a planet wrapped in slow clouds, turning in the dark around a dim and patient sun that was not on any map. The clouds moved like something alive. From orbit, Dario could smell the atmosphere through no instrument at all, which was not possible, but he could feel it anyway, something old and electrical, like the air before lightning. "Take us down," Sarah said. He took them down. Through the clouds the surface was dark green and wet and very still. Dario set the crestfall in a flat clearing near a ridge of stone, killed the engines, and sat for a moment in the silence. Then he looked out the viewport and understood that the ridge was not stone. 30 Arini were watching them land. They were nothing like Sarah in scale. The smallest one was the size of a ground vehicle. The largest, sitting at the center of the group, deep copper scales, head like a carved monument, was large enough that the crestfall could have parked inside her shadow without touching the edges. Their wings were folded. Their eyes caught the dim sunlight and held it, gold and amber, and one pair the pale silver of old ice. Dario stepped out of the ship because there was nothing else to do. Sarah stepped out beside him, and when she did, a sound moved through the gathered Arini like wind through tall grass. Not quite a sound, but the sense of one. Recognition. Relief. Something that had been braced for a long time, letting go a little. The large copper one spoke. Her voice was a physical event. Dario felt it in his back molars. "I am Marev," she said, in language he could understand. "I was Sarah's elder in the time before." She looked at Dario for a long moment. Measuring, not hostile. The way old things look at new things that have surprised them. "You are the human." "Dario Hess," he said. "Cargo and general freight. Nice planet." Marev looked at Sarah. "Does he always do that?" "Yes," Sarah said. Marev led them into the ridge, which was in fact a cave system, enormous, carved by ancient water and old fire speech alike, lit by no source Dario could identify. Other Arini were there, resting, some sleeping, some watching him pass with calm curiosity. Young ones peered at him from behind folded wings. He counted at least 40, perhaps more, further back in the dark. Marev told him the situation without softening it. The Syndicate of Orith had spent 30 years doing what empires do with things they do not understand. They had tried to extract the useful part and throw away the rest. They had taken captured Arini and studied fire speech with the specific goal of separating it from the people who carried it. They were close to succeeding. They had built a weapon, a facility at the edge of Syndicate-controlled space, that could transmit a corrupted version of fire speech as a signal. Not to mend or alter, to unmake. Organic tissue at the molecular level, across the distance of a solar system. They had been planning to use it. "We knew they were building it," Marev said. "We could not act. If we revealed ourselves, they would use it immediately. We needed the weapon neutralized before we could move." "And you couldn't do that from hiding," Dario said. "The facility is shielded against Arini life signs. Any ship we sent would be detected and destroyed before reaching the comm network at its core." Marev looked at him steadily. A human ship would read as ordinary cargo traffic. Dario looked at Sarah. She looked back at him. "You need me to fly Sarah inside their network," he said. "The Crestfall reads as a mid-range freighter with low threat profile," Marev said. "Inside the facility's comm shadow, Sarah can speak directly to the weapon's core and rewrite it. Not destroy. Destruction would trigger a backup detonation. Rewrite. Make it permanently inert. What happens to the Crestfall while she's doing that? You hold position and you do not let them board you. Against a Syndicate weapons facility." "Yes." Dario thought about this. He thought about it for about 10 seconds. Outside the cave entrance, he could see the dim sun moving across the cloud layer, and the Crestfall sitting in the clearing, a little battered, engine housing still slightly scorched from where the boarding pod had separated fast. "Okay," he said. Marev regarded him. Around her the other Arini were very still. "You did not ask about the survival odds," she said. "Would they be good?" "No." "Then it wouldn't have helped to ask." He looked at Sarah. "When do we go?" Sarah said, 2 days. "I need to eat first." Marev watched them for a long moment. Then she turned to the assembled Arini and said something in the old tongue, something low and resonant that Dario felt in his feet. He asked Sarah later what it meant. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, This is why they are still here. After everything the galaxy has put in front of them, they do not know what they cannot do. Dario thought about that. Is that a compliment? He asked. From Marev, Sara said. It is the highest one. The facility was the size of a small moon. Dario had known this from the briefing on Voron's Rest. Knowing a thing and seeing it were different. The Syndicate installation hung at the edge of a gas giant's gravity well, a sprawling structure of gray-white panels and deep sensor arrays, lit from inside by cold blue light. Ships moved around it in orderly patterns. Defense platforms sat at fixed points in a ring. Everything was calm. Everything was ready. The Crestfall drifted toward it on a false cargo identifier that Marev's people had built into the ship's transponder, broadcasting as a routine parts delivery from a supplier 3 systems out. Dario kept his hands steady on the controls. His heart was doing its own thing, and he was not paying attention to it. Outer sensor range, he said. I know. Sara was in the cargo hold, which was as far inside the ship as she could go. She had grown again in the 2 days on Voron's Rest. She no longer fit in the engine bay. She barely fit in the cargo hold. Her voice, when she spoke, carried through the entire ship without effort. Keep us at this speed. Do not change anything. I wasn't planning to. You were thinking about changing the approach angle. He had been. He said nothing. The facility hailed them at outer range. Routine check. Dario gave the cargo identifier, the supplier name, a made-up delivery manifest that Marev's people had also prepared, and was told to proceed to docking bay 9. He said thank you. He was polite. He moved the Crestfall forward at exactly the speed a cargo freighter would move, which took every instinct he had not to push faster. They were 8 minutes from the comm network core when the alarm changed. Not a boarding alarm. Something else. Something deeper in the facility systems. A shift in the signal pattern that Sara could apparently hear from the cargo hold, because she said, now, do not move the ship. And then she started speaking. It was not like the 7 words she had used against the boarding pods. That had been a short, forceful thing. This was something different. This was long and layered, word after word in the old tongue, each one landing somewhere inside the Crestfall's hull and inside Dario's chest simultaneously, and the ship hummed with it, every bolt and plate and worn-down rivet, humming in a frequency that had nothing to do with the engine. The facility's systems noticed. The alarm went from a shift to a pulse. Dario heard Duvas's voice, of all voices, break through on an open channel, sharp and certain. Lock it down. Lock the comm network down now. 8 minutes from the core. Sara kept speaking. 6 minutes. Defense platforms began to reorient. Dario saw it on the display. He did not move. He did not change the approach angle. For minutes, a squadron of intercept ships launched from the facility's lower base. Sara, he said. I know, she said, and she kept speaking. 2 minutes. The intercept ships were moving fast. Outside the viewport, the gas giant filled half the sky, banded orange and amber, enormous and indifferent. Dario looked at it because it was there, and looking at the intercept ships would not help anything. He breathed. The weapon fired. He felt it as a silence, a sudden, total absence of a signal he had not known was running. The facility's systems registered it. The intercept ships registered it. On the comm channel, Duvas registered it, and what he said in that moment was a word in Orith that Dario did not know but understood perfectly from tone. Nothing happened. No unmaking. No signal propagation. The weapon fired into a void it had created itself, rewritten by Sara's voice from the inside out, permanently, irreversibly, at the level of the things that held matter together. Dario hit the engines. Full power. The Crestfall screamed out of the debris corridor as the intercept ships scrambled to redirect, and behind them, from the dark of open space, the Orini arrived. He did not see it directly. He had his hands full flying. But the sensor display showed it. 30 contacts, enormous, dropping out of fold space around the facility in a ring, wingspans filling the readout. No weapons. They did not need weapons. They were the oldest people in this part of the galaxy, and they were done hiding, and the Syndicate facility, which had just had its only real weapon neutralized, began broadcasting a surrender request before the Orini had spoken a single word. Sara had gone quiet. Dario got the Crestfall clear of the combat perimeter, found a stable orbit a safe distance from the gas giant, and let the ship coast. The adrenaline was doing something structural to his hands. He waited for it to pass. After a while, he walked back to the cargo hold. Sarah was lying down, which she rarely did. Her eyes were open. She was the size of the hold now, scaled in deep amber gold, wings folded over herself like a blanket. She looked at him when he came in. "Did we do it?" he asked. "Yes," she said. He sat down on the floor beside her because there was nowhere else to sit. They stayed like that for a while, the ship coasting in the dark, the gas giant turning slowly outside, the comm channel filling with the sound of an empire in the first stages of realizing it had lost something it had spent 30 years building. After the surrender was formalized and Marev had spoken her piece to the remaining syndicate commanders in a tone that was polite the way geological events are polite, she found the Crestfall in orbit and hailed them. She offered Dario what the Arini could give. Safe passage. A new ship. Sanctuary, if he wanted it. Anything. Dario thought for a moment. "Can Sarah still fit in the cargo hold?" he asked. A pause. Marev's voice, when it returned, had something in it that might have been laughter expressed through tectonic plates. "She can compress herself. Temporarily. Then we're good," Dario said. "We've got a delivery to finish." The Crestfall dropped out of orbit and made for the jump point. In the cargo hold, Sarah had her eyes closed and the Crestfall hummed around her at a frequency that had no mechanical source and no name in any language Dario knew. He did not need a name for it. He just let it run.